My parents' house was always empty, not empty of furniture, but of people. Since my adolescence, I was already used to spending entire nights alone there. My parents sometimes spent the night out, sometimes only returned in the early hours of the morning. Therefore, that night, when my mother said she wouldn't be coming back and that my father was traveling, I wasn't worried. That was normal for me. I wasn't a rebellious or reckless teenager. In fact, I was far too responsible for my age, perhaps because I had been forced to learn to fend for myself early on. Over time, that enormous house became almost my responsibility. I knew every noise, every creak of the wood, every common sound. My room was upstairs at the end of the hallway. The stairs led to a small hall. To the right was my parents' room, further ahead the bathroom, and at the end, my room. I always slept with the door open, not out of carelessness, but out of habit. I liked to hear the house while I slept. It made me feel less alone. That night was completely normal. I cooked, watched TV in the living room, and went up to my room around 11. I put on some YouTube videos and scrolled through my phone. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another night alone. About an hour later, when I was almost asleep, my cell phone started ringing. It was an unknown number. I ignored it at first. I wasn't used to receiving calls, and if it was important, they would call again. Then it rang a second time, and it bothered me more than it should have, so I decided to answer. But nobody said anything. There was only complete silence on the other end of the line. No breathing, no voice, just a low, almost imperceptible sound. It took me a few seconds to realize what it was. It sounded like a TV was on. That's when it clicked. I sat up in bed immediately because the sound matched exactly what was playing on the living room TV. The same lines, the same sounds, at the exact same moments. At the time, I tried to rationalize it. I thought it could be interference, a call error, anything that could explain it. But the more I listened, the clearer it became that the audio wasn't coming from far away. It was coming from inside my house. I got up slowly and went to my bedroom door. The sound of the TV I was hearing through the phone matched perfectly with the echo inside the house. It was impossible to ignore. I asked out loud, "Who's there?" And the call dropped immediately. That was the moment I heard a creaking sound coming from the stairs. Not the normal creaking the house made, but the sound of wood reacting to weight, as if someone heavy were walking on them. My entire body froze. I went back to my room, locked the door, and started shaking. I grabbed my phone and called my dad, hoping he would answer and tell me it was some stupid joke, but no one picked up. A few seconds later, my phone vibrated again. Unknown number. I answered. This time, there was no TV sound. There were only footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. And at the exact same time, I could hear those same footsteps moving down the hallway outside my room. The doorknob turned. Someone tried to open the door, but the lock held. Through the still-connected call, I could hear the person's breathing. When I started screaming for help, the call dropped, and the footsteps faded away. I stayed locked inside my room while I kept calling my father, who finally answered. I didn't leave until I heard the sound of his car pulling into the driveway. When we went downstairs together, the TV in the living room was still on, and one of the kitchen windows was open, so we decided to call the police. They searched the entire house but found no one. They said it could have been someone trying to scare us or someone who ran away after noticing movement. They wrote everything down, said they would try to trace the call, and left. The house became silent again. The next day we received a call back from them. The number came from a disposable phone purchased that same day. My number was the only one it had called. That meant someone bought a phone specifically to call me and break into my parents' house. And somehow, that terrified me more than the break-in itself. They never found out who did it. They never called again. They never explained anything further. All I know is that after that night, I never slept with my bedroom door open again. I always thought the worst part of a hangover was the headache, until I realized that waking up dehydrated, in the dark, without knowing exactly where you are, can be much worse. That night, I didn't wake up scared. I woke up confused, and that almost cost me dearly. It was a typical weekend. After college, we still had the habit of getting together, having a few drinks and going out. Nothing excessive, nothing out of the ordinary. But that night, I ended up sleeping at a friend's house because I was too tired and drunk to drive back. His house had a large guest room, further away from the main part of the house downstairs. It was used as a game room, with a TV, a sofa, a small refrigerator in the corner, and usually very little light, almost none at night. When he went upstairs and turned off the lights, I was left alone downstairs. I fell asleep quickly. I always sleep deeply, and that night was no different until I woke up with my mouth completely dry. I opened my eyes. It was still dark. I didn't know what time it was, but it was definitely still early morning. I tried to ignore the thirst, but I couldn't. I turned my head, looking for something to help me orient myself. And that's when I realized there was something different in the room. In the corner of the basement, where it was usually empty, there was a dark shape. At first, I thought my brain was playing tricks on me, or that I was still dreaming, or still drunk. I told myself it was a discarded jacket or a poorly formed shadow. I stayed there for a few seconds, waiting for my eyes to adjust. It didn't disappear. It moved. My entire body went cold. I realized almost instantly that it wasn't part of the house. It was too tall, too wide. It was a person. My first instinct was to scream, but something inside me told me not to. Instead, I pretended I was still half asleep. I moved slowly, let out a loud yawn, as if I were waking up normally, and started complaining to myself in a low voice about being thirsty, as if I were talking to myself. My plan was simple: go up the stairs as if I hadn't understood anything. I got up from the sofa and started walking toward the stairs, and that meant getting closer to that figure. Every step felt wrong. Every second felt longer. When I placed my foot on the first step, I didn't hear anything behind me. I kept climbing slowly, but my body betrayed me, and on impulse I looked back. The person was no longer in the corner. They were standing at the foot of the stairs, looking at me. I ran without looking back. My heart was racing as I rushed up the steps and slammed the bedroom door shut. I ran through the house, waking everyone up, shouting that someone was downstairs. Within seconds, my friend and his father were awake. We went downstairs together and found the guest room door open. The back door was also open, and there were fresh mud marks on the floor near the stairs. They weren't ours, and they weren't old. We called the police. The police searched the house and said that someone had probably entered thinking it was empty and fled when they noticed movement. They wrote everything down and left. Even today, when I wake up in the middle of the night feeling thirsty, It takes me a few seconds before I get up. Because that night, I learned something simple. Sometimes, danger doesn't wake you up. It's already there, waiting for you to wake up. My dream has always been to leave home. Since school, I counted the days, not because I wanted independence, but because I hated the environment where I lived. My father drank almost every weekend. The arguments were constant, and I always lived in fear of making mistakes. It got to a point where I simply couldn't live my life there anymore, in that place. As I got older, this became an even bigger problem. I didn't bring friends home. I never brought anyone I was getting to know or liked. There was no way to explain why my father was always upset, or why the atmosphere would change out of nowhere. So when the first real opportunity arose, I grabbed it without thinking twice and left home at 19. I was attending college nearby. I didn't have any money to spare, and my parents weren't going to pay for anything. I spent weeks checking Zillow, Facebook Marketplace, and Craigslist every day, always looking for something cheap, quick, anything that would be just for me. When I found an ad that seemed feasible, I went to see it the same day. The layout is important, so I'll describe it now. The place was simple. A small room right at the entrance, the kitchen next to it separated by a counter, and a short hallway leading to the bathroom and a built-in wardrobe. At the end of the hallway was the bedroom. The bedroom door opened directly onto that narrow hallway. At the time, this meant nothing to me. Even though it was simple, I felt free for the first time. Coming home and knowing that no one would yell, no one would drink, no one would start an argument out of nowhere. The first few months were good. I was in heaven. A common but peaceful routine, and for me, that was everything. One Friday, a friend came over after work. We ordered food, had some beers, and chatted until late. Nothing out of the ordinary. When he left, it was almost midnight. I was very tired and went to bed without even thinking about closing my bedroom door completely. I woke up in the middle of the night to a dry thud in the hallway, like something had hit the wall. My first instinct was to reflexively call out my friend's name, but I got no answer. I looked at my phone and saw that he had left more than an hour ago. The bedroom door was still ajar, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something strange. There was a different shadow on the door frame. It didn't look like a shadow of light. I couldn't identify it. So in an act of courage, I grabbed my cell phone and turned on the flashlight. When the light hit the door frame, I clearly saw two hands gripping the side of the wall, fingers spread, firm. The instant the light revealed that, the hands clenched and disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. I started yelling for whoever was there to come out. I turned on all the lights in the hallway, bathroom, kitchen, and living room. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. I went to the front door to lock it and realized I didn't remember hearing it open, much less close. I called a friend, completely panicked, and he said it sounded like sleep deprivation, stress, maybe a waking hallucination, or even a nightmare. That made sense enough for me to want to believe it, so I locked the room and slept poorly the rest of the night. The next day I came home from work and went straight to my room. I looked closely at the door frame and saw clear fingerprints in the paint, exactly where I had seen those hands. I even took a picture. That picture is still saved on my phone to this day. I called my dad and told him everything. He was silent for a few seconds and said, "You messed up. Open door, small place, anyone can get in." That made me even angrier because he was right. Nothing was stolen, and I never found out who got in. But after that night, I never slept peacefully in that place again. Even alone, I always locked and checked all the doors. I had the feeling that someone had been there before me, and when my contract ended, I went far away.